Arrival in Australia is often marked by a quiet contradiction. The country presents itself as informal and relaxed, yet its social order is carefully maintained through unspoken rules. Newcomers quickly notice that welcome is not expressed through grand gestures or overt enthusiasm, but through a subdued normalcy. There is no ceremonial inclusion, no sudden shift to accommodate difference. Instead, inclusion is offered through the assumption that everyone will eventually find their place by observing, adjusting, and not drawing excessive attention to themselves. First impressions tend to centre on tone rather than structure. Australians often appear friendly without being emotionally intrusive. Greetings are casual, humour is dry, and conversations move quickly away from personal depth. This creates an atmosphere that feels open but guarded at the same time. Newcomers are rarely interrogated about their background or intentions. Curiosity exists, but it is restrained. The social message is subtle. Participation is welcome, but self-definition is expected to emerge gradually, not be announced. Public spaces reinforce this impression. Cafes, workplaces, and neighbourhood interactions operate on an assumption of equality, but also on a shared understanding of boundaries. Australians tend to resist overt displays of ambition or self-importance, and newcomers who present themselves too forcefully may feel a gentle social pushback. Confidence is accepted when it is understated. Individuality is tolerated when it does not disrupt the collective rhythm. The result is an environment that feels easygoing on the surface, yet carefully balanced beneath it. This balance is deeply cultural. Australian society places high value on social smoothness and emotional moderation. Conflict is managed through humour or avoidance rather than direct confrontation. Newcomers often sense that fitting in is less about adopting specific customs and more about mastering tone, knowing when to speak, when to deflect with humour, and when to stay silent. Belonging is measured not by how much one shares, but by how well one reads the room. Over time, patterns emerge. Invitations may come slowly, but once extended, they tend to be consistent. Trust is built through repetition rather than intensity. Australians often prefer familiarity over novelty, which can make early stages of integration feel static. Progress is not marked by milestones, but by a gradual reduction in social distance. One day, the newcomer realizes they are no longer being assessed. They are simply there. This approach to welcoming shapes the emotional landscape of settlement. The absence of overt validation can feel disorienting, especially for those accustomed to explicit encouragement or structured support. Yet it also creates a form of stability. Expectations are low but steady. There is little pressure to perform gratitude or enthusiasm. Acceptance is quiet, conditional, and durable. In this environment, adaptation becomes less about transformation and more about calibration. Newcomers who learn to move at the same pace, to soften their edges, and to observe before asserting themselves often find that inclusion arrives almost unnoticed. It does not announce itself. It settles in slowly, like the climate felt over time rather than upon arrival. Across the Tasman Sea, the tone shifts, though the restraint remains. New Zealand offers a different texture of welcome, one that feels softer, more attentive, yet equally indirect. Newcomers often notice a stronger emphasis on politeness and emotional consideration. Interactions are gentler, pauses are longer, and disagreement is handled with visible care. The surface calm resembles Australia's, but beneath it lies a different cultural logic. First impressions in New Zealand are shaped by an atmosphere of mutual accommodation. There is an expectation that everyone will try not to inconvenience others, emotionally or practically. Newcomers are often met with patience rather than distance. Questions are asked carefully, phrased to avoid intrusion. Interest is expressed through listening rather than humour. This creates an environment that feels immediately courteous, though not necessarily intimate. Public life reflects this sensibility. Workplaces tend to emphasize cooperation over competition, and social spaces reward modesty and emotional awareness. Newcomers may sense that being overly assertive or opinionated draws subtle discomfort. Where Australians often deflect intensity with irony, New Zealanders tend to soften it with restraint. The goal is not to neutralize difference, but to keep it from overwhelming the shared space. Cultural expectations are communicated quietly. There is a strong preference for consensus, and open conflict is viewed as socially disruptive. Newcomers who arrive from more confrontational cultures may initially interpret this as passivity. Over time, it becomes clear that disagreement still exists, but it is managed through understatement and careful timing. What is unsaid often carries more weight than what is declared. This affects how belonging develops. In New Zealand, inclusion often arrives through reliability and emotional consistency. Being steady, considerate, and predictable matters more than being impressive. Invitations come not from charisma, but from demonstrated care for group harmony. Trust builds through small gestures repeated over time, showing up when expected. Listening without dominating, responding with measured empathy, despite these differences. Both countries share an underlying principle. Welcome is not performative. Neither Australia nor New Zealand relies on overt affirmation to signal acceptance. Instead, newcomers are absorbed slowly, tested quietly, and integrated through everyday normalcy. There are no defining moments that announce arrival into the social fabric. Belonging emerges gradually, almost invisibly. For many newcomers, this produces an emotional adjustment. The lack of explicit feedback can create uncertainty. Progress feels ambiguous. Yet this ambiguity also reduces pressure. There is no demand to constantly prove value or enthusiasm. Acceptance is not something to be earned quickly, but something that unfolds through time and alignment. As settlement continues, the contrast between the two cultures becomes clearer. Australia offers inclusion through shared rhythm. Blend in, keep things light, don't disrupt the flow. New Zealand offers inclusion through shared care. Be considerate, be steady, don't impose. Both paths lead toward belonging, but they shape the experience in distinct ways, leaving newcomers to navigate not just new places, but new emotional climates that reward patience over performance, over longer periods of settlement. These differing approaches begin to shape how newcomers relate not only to society, but to themselves. In Australia, the understated welcome often encourages emotional self-reliance. Without frequent affirmation or structured inclusion, newcomers learn to regulate their expectations. Social confidence becomes quieter, less performative. Many discover that being accepted depends less on explanation and more on consistency, showing up, maintaining composure, and respecting the informal social order that values ease over intensity. This gradually alters how success is interpreted. Social integration is not measured by rapid closeness, but by the absence of friction. When interactions stop feeling tentative, when humor no longer needs explanation, when presence is no longer remarked upon, belonging has quietly arrived. For many newcomers, this moment is only recognized in hindsight. Australia does not announce acceptance. It withdraws scrutiny. In New Zealand, the transformation follows a different emotional arc. The early politeness creates a sense of safety, but also a heightened awareness of emotional responsibility. Newcomers often become more attentive listeners, more conscious of how their words affect group harmony. Over time, this fosters a gentler social identity. Expression becomes more measured. Opinions are shaped with consideration for timing and tone. Belonging grows not from visibility, but from reliability and care. This environment reshapes internal expectations as well. Progress feels slower, but emotionally steadier. Relationships deepen gradually, built on trust rather than familiarity. When inclusion arrives, it often feels sincere and enduring. The restraint that once felt distant reveals itself as protection of social balance, of emotional space, of collective calm. Both cultures, in their own ways, challenge common assumptions about welcome. They resist spectacle. They downplay overt affirmation. They place responsibility on the newcomer to observe, adapt, and align rather than demand recognition. This can feel ambiguous, even isolating at first, yet it also offers a quieter form of dignity. Acceptance is not conditional on enthusiasm or self-promotion. It rests on shared rhythm, mutual respect, and time. In these societies, welcome is not an event but a process. It unfolds through repetition, restraint, and everyday normalcy. Newcomers are not pulled in. They are slowly surrounded. And in that gradual absorption, something subtle happens. Identity becomes less performative. Social life becomes less urgent. Belonging stops being a goal and starts becoming a background condition. Australia and New Zealand do not greet newcomers loudly, but they do make room. Their welcomes are shaped by climate, history, and collective temperament, one favoring ease and social smoothness, the other care and emotional moderation. Both reveal that inclusion does not always arrive through warmth or declaration. Sometimes it arrives through silence, patience, and the quiet decision to stay.